a Rehoboth Farmers Association. Because I can remember going to the clam bakes or barbecues that they used to put on. I think it was an organization, I'm not sure, you can research it out, that used to help farmers by being able to buy things in bulk or something. They have, they could pool their resources together to buy things or whatever. Or it might have been just a social organization. But as far as I know, it does not exist anymore. It went out a long time ago. There was also a Rehoboth Poultrymen's Association. I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist anymore either. Mr. Westfield, who was next to my father's place on Water Street, he was a member of that association. I don't know if my Uncle Tony was or not, because there were a lot of poultry farms in Rehoboth at that time. I think that's also become a thing of the past. One of the questions on there was where you get supplies from, because they had Roy Grain, that's on 118. Her husband Pete Roy was a big, he was the grain distributor. A lot of the farmers around here bought their grain from him back in those 40s, 50s era. And she's still alive. I think she is, because she was still selling. I know within the last few years she was still selling out of that thing. The other thing I wanted to bring up was there was a tradition or system where the town of Rehoboth used to give out the rights to seine for shad in the Palmer River. And I think this goes back many, many, many years. It may even go back to colonial times. I don't know. When I was a kid, you could, I'm talking a little tight, you could go down to the brooks that fed the Palmer River down in South Rehoboth. And there were so many herring coming up those brooks. And a few branches were strewn across the brook. You could just catch the herring right there. You didn't need a net or anything. You didn't need a hook. You didn't need a fishing pole. You just could grab the herring right out of the brook. So you could easily see how the Indians could easily have found herring to fertilize their corn and beans and squash and stuff that they did. That's how they grazed around here. And anyway, there were lots of shad we used to pull out. We had two places where we used to sit. Trying to back up. So I was on the last crew. And when I was just like junior high school going into high school, I was on the last crew of the people that had the rights to seine that river. And I think these were given out mostly to farmers to supplement their income. It was something they can get some early money in the spring, a way that they get a little early money. And they used to sell it down at the fish market, down at the foot of Waterman Street, at the Seekonk River in East Providence. I think that's where they went with the fish. I never went with them. The last two people that had it were Amna Gopian, my father's farmer neighbor across the street, and Lyman Reynolds. And we used to get up before, so everything seemed to get better and better and better, but still, farming was still a tough racket compared to what other people were getting into, other jobs. And that generation, especially that immigrant generation, didn't want their kids to become farmers. They wanted them to do something else. My mother went to the 11th grade. It was a Portuguese family, 14 kids. They had two tenement houses in East Transit Street in Fox Point. My grandfather worked very hard. My grandmother stayed home with the family. They still had trouble making ends meet. 11th grade, my mother was pretty good. She was like a commercial track you'd have today, probably in high school. She could type 56 words a minute. And she wanted to be a receptionist. That's what she wanted to be. My grandfather pulled her out of school to wash floors in the east side of Providence for 25 cents a floor. So when they went through that, they wanted their kids to have a better life. My father only went to the 6th grade. And all he knew was farming. Really all he knew was farming. Anything else he picked up the hard way. So they wanted their kids to do something else. So they pushed education. It was also the time of the Peace Corps. It was the time of education could solve every problem in the world. It was get an education, do better than I did. That's what that generation was. And so we went out and got an education. I wanted to be a language teacher. I loved the farm, but I went to school. I went to school, graduate school. I had 2 years into the service in Berlin during the Vietnam era. And I came back I finished up, got my master's degree, and went out, taught at Rehoboth High School for 8 years. But that's what they wanted. So you ask me, why did I become a farmer? That farming is always still in you. My father loved it. So it was like a security blanket for me. I felt very comfortable in farming, so I kept doing that. Eventually, I quit teaching school twice, and I went back to full-time farming, and I've been there ever since.
Tell me, well, we already kind of talked about the nationalities.
Then nationalities at that time in South Rehoboth was pretty amazing. I don't know. Otis Dyer would probably be the person to ask about all the land transactions and who bought from whom, what nationalities bought from whom, and all. But the way I understood it was most of the land tracts back in those days were Yankee or English ethnically people that were living in South Rehoboth. They had originally, I guess, South Rehoboth was originally settled from East Providence, Rhode Island, when they came in here. But there was in Armenia there was there was a war with the Turks, and the Turks at that time ruthlessly did a number on the Armenian population, and many of them fled, tried to escape it, and a lot of them landed here, all over the country for that matter, but a lot of them landed here. A lot of them were in agriculture in Armenia, so when they came here, it was natural for them to become Armenian farmers here, Armenian Americans. And the same thing happened with the Portuguese, the Azorean, especially the Azorean and Portuguese population, and the Yankees. So almost every mailbox, almost without exception, there were some Polish farms, Bukowski farm, there was a big dairy farm in Brook Street and Water Street. There were other nationalities. I don't want to slight any nationalities, but a lot of them, and looking on my streets, was either Armenian, Yankee, Portuguese. Many of them, almost every mailbox, that's what they were. And we all got along. And we all got along, and we had a community. I try not to idealize things, but talk about community in Rehoboth at that time. It was very, the Spanish say mezquino. You were very small. Your world was very small, and you were so busy on the farm. You didn't really have time to. You weren't in the next person's kitchen having coffee. This wasn't what was done. But you knew the people. You talked to them over there was no fences. I shouldn't say over the fence, but you talked to them. Those days there was no fences because the pieces of land were larger. The houses were farther apart. The closer people get, the more problems arise. You never really worried about boundaries. You walked across. You walked across other people's farms. You get from one place to another. No one worried about. There was no dog leashes. There were dogs on all the farms, but nobody had problems with dogs. Dogs took care of the woodchucks. Those had a place in society at that time. But if anything ever happened, a storm, somebody's power went out, some kind of catastrophe happened, people pulled together like you wouldn't believe. I mean, they were always there to help each other.